At 29, my wife Jessica, a vision of beauty, dropped a bombshell that I could never have anticipated. I had planned the evening meticulously, thinking it would be a memorable night, a celebration of our relationship and a step towards something even bigger. The elegant dinner at one of our favorite upscale restaurants was just the beginning. I had spared no expense, ensuring every detail was perfect. The pristine white tablecloths, the wine list that boasted the finest selections, and a diamond necklace she had been admiring for months, setting me back nearly $1,000. Yet, the evening I had hoped would bring us closer would soon turn into a desperate attempt to reclaim some control over what was happening. Throughout dinner, I sensed a shift in Jessica's demeanor. The easy, relaxed conversation we usually enjoyed felt strained, almost forced. Her eyes seemed to drift around the room, scanning the space as though seeking someone or something beyond our table. Her gaze, usually warm and steady, now looked restless, evading mine more often than not. I felt an uncomfortable tension growing between us, but I couldn't pinpoint its source. After the main course, with another glass of wine in her hand, Jessica finally spoke up. "Tom, there's something important we need to talk about," she began, her voice quiet, tinged with seriousness. I could tell something heavy weighed on her mind. I set down my glass, focusing intently on her, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. Maybe she wanted to discuss starting a family, something we talked about before but agreed to postpone until we felt more secure financially and in our careers. I was ready for that conversation, hopeful even, but her hesitation told me this was something else entirely. "Tom, we need to have an honest discussion," she continued, her tone softer, yet laced with emotion. "I've been doing a lot of soul-searching lately, and I think it's important for me to understand who I am outside of our relationship. I believe this journey will ultimately make me a better partner to you in the long run." Her words blindsided me, sinking in like a weight pressing down on my chest. I could feel my heart racing as I tried to process what she was saying. "What are you suggesting exactly?" I asked, my voice steady but my mind reeling. Jessica hesitated, biting her lip before finally meeting my gaze. "I want to see other people, Tom," she confessed, her voice unwavering but heavy with emotion. "I need the freedom to explore this part of myself." The shock of her statement hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, other people?" I demanded, my voice cracking with disbelief and hurt. She nodded slowly, confirming my worst fears. "Yes, it includes seeing other men," she admitted. For a moment, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Jessica was asking me to accept her wish to date other people, like it was some kind of small favor, something I should be okay with. My frustration swelled, and I could feel my voice shaking as I struggled to understand. "How can you possibly think I'd be okay with this?" She reached out, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away, unable to grasp the words coming from her. "I love you," she said softly, her expression sincere. "That hasn't changed. I just need to explore this part of who I am. This is something I have to do." The noise of the bustling restaurant seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the echo of her words in my mind. Sitting there, stunned, I realized that what was supposed to be a night celebrating our anniversary had turned into a turning point in our relationship. "So, you want to have an affair and expect me to just accept it?" I asked, my voice rising louder than I intended, catching the attention of nearby diners. Jessica's face tightened in a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. "Lower your voice, Tom," she hissed, her gaze darting around the room. "We don't need everyone listening." That's when it hit me. She had chosen this busy restaurant as the place to drop this bombshell. Perhaps she had been counting on me to keep my reaction in check, to not cause a scene in public. But I couldn't help it. A sick feeling churned in my stomach, twisting my thoughts as I barely managed to breathe. "Jessica, why?" I choked out, desperate for some kind of explanation. "Why other men?" Her eyes softened for a moment, but her resolve remained firm. "Tom, I'm not leaving you. I just need this time to understand myself better. It's not about you. It's about finding clarity within myself." Her words, meant to reassure me, fell hollow between us. I sat there, struggling to wrap my mind around her words. Could our marriage withstand this? My heart raced, but deep down, I knew the answer was far from simple. What should have been a night of celebration had turned into something unrecognizable. Jessica had laid bare her desire to pursue relationships beyond our marriage, as though it were something trivial. She even suggested that somehow, this would ultimately benefit us in the long run. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The idea of her dating others was something I couldn't accept, let alone live with. I sat there, stunned, struggling to process her request, feeling as though I had been transported into a terrible dream from which there was no waking. Rising from my chair, I set my napkin down and drained the last of my wine, its bitterness matching the ache in my chest. Without a word, I left the restaurant, not looking back. I heard Jessica's voice calling out behind me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't bear it anymore. I needed to escape, to think, to breathe. The hum of the car's engine and the rhythmic blur of passing streetlights offered me a strange comfort as I drifted in and out of thought. Time and place seemed to slip away until, finally, I woke the next morning. I found myself parked on an unfamiliar street, my head pounding, the remnants of the previous night lingering heavily in my mind. I stumbled into a nearby diner and ordered a strong cup of coffee and a hearty breakfast, trying to gather the strength to face reality. My phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from Jessica, but I wasn't ready to respond. Letting Jessica date others? The very thought of it was unimaginable. It would surely unravel the life we had built together. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, seemed like a stranger now. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. When I finally returned home, Jessica rushed to greet me, her face filled with worry. "Where were you all night?" "I was so afraid something happened," she said, reaching out to me. I held back, standing firm. "Jessica, I need to clean up. Then we'll talk about this idea you brought up." After a long, hot shower, I gathered my thoughts. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. Was Jessica still the woman I had vowed to stand beside? Or had this revelation marked the beginning of an ending? I loved her deeply. Our wedding, our shared dreams, the life we envisioned together. It all flashed through my mind. But her recent behavior left me questioning everything. Sitting down across from her in the kitchen, coffee in hand, I tried to steady myself. "Jessica, I need to understand why you want to pursue relationships outside our marriage," I said, meeting her gaze. She hesitated before answering. "Tom, I need to feel fulfilled as a woman. Right now, I don't feel my needs are being met. This is something I have to figure out for myself." I could barely keep my voice steady as I responded. "So, you're not clear on what you need, and you think stepping outside our marriage will help you find clarity?" "No, Tom," she said softly. "I'll still be here with you, but I need the freedom to set my own boundaries and follow my own path." Her eyes were uncertain but determined. I took a deep breath, my voice filled with finality. "No, Jessica, I can't support this," I told her, firm and unwavering. "We vowed to be partners in everything, and now you want to introduce other people into what was supposed to be ours alone." Her voice wavered with frustration. "Tom, it's more complicated than that. I need something that's been missing for years. Work has taken over our lives, and I don't feel the same appreciation from you that I once did." Her words hit me hard, sparking a frustration that had been simmering just beneath the surface. "Everything I do, Jessica, is for us," I countered, my tone sharp. "I've sacrificed so much to give us a future, and now, on the brink of reaching that dream, you want to stray?" I faced her across the table and asked the question that had been gnawing at me. "Jessica, are you planning on being involved with other men?" She hesitated, her eyes lowering. "If I connect with someone, yes. It could happen," she admitted softly. The finality of her answer hit me like a punch to the gut. I could barely contain my disbelief. "So, you're telling me you'll be seeing other men, and that's not cheating because I know about it?" Jessica's gaze stayed steady, and she responded without flinching. "It's not infidelity if there's honesty, Tom." I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling as though my entire world had been shattered. Jessica, my wife of 5 years, seemed to think we could put our marriage on pause while she explored her desires. She insisted that our family would remain intact, claiming her love for me hadn't changed, and that she still wanted us to stay together. But as her words settled into my mind, I was left grappling with an overwhelming wave of questions. How often do you plan to pursue this? I pressed, my voice thick with disbelief. Is this something you're going to do every week? Every night? She looked at me, a hint of irritation in her eyes. Does it matter, Tom? Why are you so fixated on the details? I felt my frustration rising, my patience thinning, because I need to understand what my life will look like while you're out with other men, I said, my voice steady but edged with bitterness. I don't have anyone else, Jessica. At least, not yet. She stared at me for a moment, and I could see her uncertainty, but also her resolve. Have you fully thought this through? Do you realize what this could do to us? To our marriage? I asked, hoping she'd see the gravity of the situation. Jessica nodded, but there was no clear response from her, almost as if she hadn't fully considered the impact this decision would have on me. Then, she threw out a statement that would shape our future. If you love me, you'll let me do this. I didn't waver. If you love me, Jessica, you won't go through with it. The conversation shifted, and I laid down the terms. If you're going to do this, you'll need to move out. I won't share this home with you while you're involved with others. Bringing them here is absolutely off limits. You'll need to find a separate place. Her face fell, and I saw the desperation creeping into her voice. Where would I go, Tom? She asked, almost pleading. Perhaps with Sarah, I said, firm in my response. She's single, and you already spend time with her. Otherwise, find a short-term rental and cover the expenses yourself. Jessica worked as a third-grade teacher, and I, a forensic auditor for a top firm, earned well through my salary and bonuses. I could tell she hadn't expected such a firm stance from me, likely thinking I would back down. But as I continued, I made it clear. You want an open marriage? Fine. But you won't live here while it's happening. Are you planning to come back home eventually? I asked, trying to steady my anger. She looked at me, conviction in her eyes. Yes, Tom. I love you, and I want us to build a future together. I couldn't hide my anger. And what am I supposed to do while you're with other men? Am I just supposed to wait for you, pretending everything's fine? Should I keep my loyalty intact while you test out your feelings elsewhere? She softened her tone, almost as if she thought her words were reassuring. Tom, I want you as my husband. My feelings for you won't change, no matter what I do when I'm away. Her declaration felt surreal. She seemed to think that agreeing to stay out of our home during her dates was a fair compromise, as if that alone would somehow erase the pain her actions had caused. But I couldn't let that slide. All right then. By the end of the week, arrange your accommodations, I said, my voice final. But for now, gather your things and move to the spare bedroom. I can't share our bed with you. Not while this plan of yours hangs over us. Jessica was taken aback, maybe realizing that I wasn't going to just let this go. Perhaps she thought I would surrender to her demands, letting her have her freedom while we continued living as if nothing had changed. But that wasn't going to happen. Jessica's friend Sarah, another teacher, had likely fueled these ideas in her. I had my suspicions about Sarah, who had gone through a scandalous divorce after her own infidelity became public. Now, she was notorious for encouraging reckless behavior, and I could only imagine her telling Jessica that exploring herself was okay before settling down and having a family. But for me, the line was clear. If Jessica crossed it, there would be no family, not with me. Divorce was the only option. I stood up, feeling the weight of the conversation. Is that it, Tom? Are you telling me to leave? Jessica asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes, for now, I answered, my voice firm. Let me be clear. I don't want you to do this. We vowed to be faithful, but you're willing to break that promise. Did you think I would just stand by while you see other men? Her silence was all the answer I needed. Without saying another word, I grabbed my keys and headed toward the door. Where are you going? She called after me, but I didn't answer. I couldn't look back. I replied, my voice steady, I don't know yet. I glanced at Jessica, my eyes hardening with a mixture of resolve and bitterness. But don't forget to move your things to the spare room and find a place to stay. I could hear the door shut behind me with a definitive thud, the sound echoing through the empty house. For a brief moment, I considered confronting Sarah directly, demanding answers, but I stopped myself. Jessica had made her choice, and now she would have to face the consequences of her actions alone. Early Monday morning, before Jessica even woke up, I was already out the door. Her decisions had left me with a mountain of things to handle, and I was determined not to stand idly by while my world crumbled. I immediately reached out to my attorney, a trusted friend who didn't specialize in divorce but knew the right people who did. He quickly referred me to a skilled lawyer who could help me navigate this difficult path forward. That afternoon, I sat down with her, the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. She was a seasoned litigator, well-versed in our state's laws, and immediately understood my goal. I wanted this to be as amicable as possible. An equal split of assets seemed fair to me. We both had worked hard for what we had, and I wasn't about to fight over material things if it meant prolonging the agony of this broken marriage. With her support, we began drafting the initial paperwork, planning to wait and see if there was any concrete proof of Jessica's affairs before moving forward with the divorce. It felt like the beginning of the end, a slow, painful unraveling that I knew would only gain momentum from here. The rest of the week dragged on, the days blending together. I kept my time at home brief, spending hours at the gym every day, trying to work off the anger and frustration that had taken root deep inside me. Jessica, meanwhile, spent more and more time with Sarah, confirming everything I had feared. On Thursday, she announced she'd be staying with Sarah temporarily while finding a more permanent place to live. It was exactly what I had expected. Her so-called exploration would unfold freely without me around to complicate it. Finally, a week after our 5th wedding anniversary, Jessica packed up her belongings and loaded them into her car. As she stood there, one last look at me, a flash of desperation in her eyes, she hesitated. "Are you sure, Tom? Can we find a way to work through this so I can stay?" she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. I met her gaze, exhausted, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of her betrayal crashing down on me. "Jessica," I said, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest, "if you truly wanted to make our marriage work, you wouldn't be doing this. I want you here, but not like this. If you're unwilling to try counseling, I don't know what else to say. Please just go." As she left, I walked to the hardware store and bought new locks for the house, securing everything against any unannounced visits. That weekend was quiet, too quiet. I stayed home, hoping that deep down, Jessica would realize the mistake she was making. But as the days passed, I could feel the hope slowly fading away. I focused all my energy on the gym and even started running again, trying to distract myself from the emotional turmoil that had consumed me. I spent hours online, searching for answers. I couldn't understand what had driven Jessica to betray me, to tear apart everything we had worked for. It shocked me to learn just how common infidelity was. Nearly half of married people strayed, yet almost 90% still stayed in their marriages. Many couples silently tolerated affairs, especially when children were involved. I found that studies showed the repetitive demands of home life and the daily grind often led women to seek excitement elsewhere, claiming they felt unfulfilled within the boundaries of their marriage. It was a revelation that hit me hard, leaving me with more questions than answers. Now, Jessica, the woman I had once dreamed with about a future together, had chosen a path I could never follow. She seemed to believe that a lover who provided her with constant thrill and attention would fulfill her needs, something that had been missing from our marriage. I began to reflect on what makes a successful marriage. Maybe, I thought, part of it lies in treating your partner as you did in the early days, maintaining that excitement and affection even after the initial spark fades. At one point, I even entertained the thought of running into her at one of the clubs she frequented with Sarah, wondering if things could have been different if I had courted her again, as if she were a new flame. People have various reasons for infidelity: a need for connection, a lack of passion or intimacy, or even retaliation against a partner's own indiscretions. Some even claim that an affair could save a marriage. But none of that seemed to matter now. It wasn't about what she wanted anymore. It was about what I had lost and what I couldn't get back. I found that hard to believe. Researchers studying relationships have documented these motives, yet it all seemed convoluted to me. Open marriages, where both partners allow for outside relationships, tend to fall apart eventually. As emotions get tangled, feelings get hurt, and couples drift apart. Polyamorous relationships, especially those with children involved, only add complexity, and the risks, emotionally, physically, and even health-wise, are high. To me, monogamy still felt like the foundation of a stable marriage. If two people can't agree on that, maybe they shouldn't be married at all. I wondered if my own focus on building a future for us had contributed to Jessica's desire for excitement elsewhere. Had I been so absorbed in planning our future that I missed the signs? All I knew was that her departure left a void, a gnawing sense of loss, and an emptiness in our home. The following week felt slow and agonizing. I didn't reach out to Jessica, and she only messaged me once, asking me to forward her mail to her new address. Her brief, businesslike tone gave no indication that she wanted to work things out, signaling her determination to pursue this path without me. Thoughts of following her to see where she was going with Sarah crossed my mind, but I held back. Driving by her apartment a few times was enough to make me realize that I had to let her make her own choices. If she were to come back truly committed, it had to be her decision. But with each passing day, the prospect of her return faded, and I grew more accustomed to the idea of a life without her. A month passed with almost no contact, until Jessica suddenly showed up at the house unannounced. When her key didn't work, she rang the doorbell. I opened the door, keeping my face neutral. "Jessica, what brings you here?" I asked. She looked surprised. "Tom, why doesn't my key work anymore?" she asked, confused. "I changed the locks," I answered matter-of-factly, standing firm in the doorway. "So, why are you here?" She looked taken aback but replied, "I came to pick up a few things I left when I moved in with Sarah." Her visit once again was strictly business, with no attempts at reconciliation or even a hint of regret. Did she honestly think I'd sit idly by, unaffected by her affairs? "I boxed up your things. They're in the garage," I said, motioning for her to follow. She looked puzzled. "Why would you do that, Tom?" she asked, visibly surprised. Letting her into the garage, I gestured toward the stack of boxes, all neatly packed. "How long are you planning to stay with Sarah?" I asked, my tone steady. "Sarah's been great. I'll be with her for a few more months, but then I'll come back as a better partner to you, and we can start a family," she replied confidently. Her words stirred a mixture of disbelief and disappointment in me. How could she believe that dating other men would somehow transform her into a better wife or prepare her for motherhood? I had a very different perspective. "So, have you found a boyfriend yet?" I asked bluntly, not really expecting an answer. She blushed, and the look on her face confirmed what I'd suspected. "Sarah and I have been on a few dates with guys from the club, but that's it," she admitted, trying to downplay the situation. I didn't resist pressing further. "And the physical side, how's that working out with your new dates?" Jessica's cheeks reddened as she rummaged through the boxes, avoiding my gaze. Leaving her to sort through her things, I returned to the kitchen for my coffee and the morning paper. A few minutes later, she appeared, looking around as though she expected chaos. Instead, she found a spotless home. I had hired cleaners to come in several times a week. No dirty dishes, no clutter. Everything was perfectly in place. "Do you need anything else?" I asked, sensing her curiosity about life in the house without her presence. "So, Tom, how have you been managing since I moved out?" she inquired, her voice laced with a hint of concern. "Fine," I replied. "Work's been keeping me busy, and I've been traveling more." She probed further. "Have you been going out or just staying in?" It was the question I had anticipated, the one that hinted at her curiosity about my personal life. Time to add a twist. "Actually, I've joined a cycling group. We meet twice a week and usually grab food afterward. It's been a good way to stay active." I didn't mention how much better it felt to be away from her, surrounded by people who didn't carry the weight of betrayal. I'd lost weight, the stress and exercise combining to shift my focus from the pain of Jessica's choices. Her response showed a hint of surprise, perhaps even a glimmer of regret. It was dawning on her that I wouldn't simply wait for her while she explored her desires. If she was looking for a boyfriend, she might face more consequences than she anticipated. I later learned that Jessica had, in fact, been seeing two men from the club she frequented with Sarah. Both men, however, were married and seemed interested only in casual flings. She had become just another chapter in their nightlife, a temporary escape. By the time 2 months had passed, I was resigned to the end of our marriage and prepared to move on. The silence from Jessica confirmed she had no concern for our relationship. She enjoyed her freedom, and her choices were leading her down a path further from our life together. Even if she did consider returning, it would come with conditions I wasn't certain I'd accept. Discovering that she'd gone to the Dominican Republic with one of her boyfriends during the school break only solidified my decision. They had enjoyed a sun-drenched vacation, seemingly carefree, while my life unraveled. So much for her claim that exploring would strengthen our marriage. It had done nothing of the sort. Jessica's decisions hadn't gone unnoticed. Her friend Sarah painted me as a neglectful husband, fueling Jessica's resolve to pursue other men. But the reality was different. As Jessica settled into a 2-bedroom apartment with her dissatisfied, divorced friend, her reputation among friends and family began to tarnish. When her mother found out about the trip to the Caribbean, she contacted me, sensing something was deeply wrong. Jessica's mother was taken aback when I explained the reason for our separation. "Your daughter left to pursue other relationships?" I said, watching the disbelief settle over her. I encouraged her to confront Jessica directly, and so she did. "Jessica, why did you leave Tom? Has he mistreated you?" her mother asked, looking for some justification. "No, Mom, he hasn't mistreated me," Jessica replied. "But I don't feel the spark anymore. I don't feel desired or wanted, so I'm looking for it elsewhere. I need a thrill before Tom and I start a family, but I'll return to him eventually. Everything will be fine." Her mother was shocked, warning her that this path would ruin our marriage. "Cheating will destroy any chance of you two staying together. Can't you see that?" Jessica brushed her off. "Tom loves me, Mom. He understands. I'll go back, and we'll start our family then." Despite her mother's heartfelt advice, Jessica's confidence was unshaken. As for me, after 3 months of living in her absence, I realized it was time to consider a life without her. Jessica had chosen her path, and I had to choose mine. Gathering the resolve, I asked a woman I knew from cycling, Diane, out for a date. After months of enduring a monotonous cycle of work, gym, cycling, and sleep, I was ready for a change. Part of me had held onto the hope that Jessica would come back, but it became clear that she was relishing her newfound freedom, finding the thrill and validation she felt were missing from our relationship. Realizing it was time to move forward, I reached out to Diane, aiming to build a genuine connection without rushing into anything. Word about my separation had spread among our cycling group, and I suspected some of them were even aware of Jessica's busy dating life. So when I invited Diane for a casual evening out, I was pleasantly surprised by her enthusiasm. We planned a Saturday evening with kayaking on a nearby lake, followed by dinner. Though Diane hadn't kayaked before, she was excited to try, and we spent 3 hours on the water, covering about 10 miles. Afterward, we enjoyed a relaxed dinner at a charming restaurant, sharing a light-hearted conversation over steak and pasta. As the evening wound down, we got ice cream at a waterfront stand, and when I dropped her off, I was about to give her a polite kiss on the cheek when she leaned in, surprising me with a kiss on the lips. Not wanting to seem overly eager, I waited until our next cycling meetup on Tuesday to ask for another date. Diane had worried my silence meant I didn't enjoy our first date, so I reassured her, expressing how much I'd enjoyed our time together. I enjoyed Diane's company, and for our next outing, we chose a round of golf, just a casual afternoon followed by a barbecue at my place. By evening, as I prepared to drive her home, Diane placed my keys on the counter and asked to see the bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with Diane beside me. She was a beautiful woman with dark hair, green eyes, and a passionate nature that shone through in her work as a pediatric nurse. We shared breakfast together, our conversation naturally turning to my plans and the likelihood of a divorce. Understanding her need for clarity, I shared the details about Jessica's behavior and her peculiar justification for leaving. Diane's reaction was one of empathy, which further affirmed my decision to move forward with my life. That Monday, I contacted my lawyer to arrange for an investigator to find out just how far Jessica's social life had gone. It didn't take long to confirm that Jessica had been seeing multiple men, often meeting them at Sarah's apartment after nights out. Armed with this information, I filed for divorce, and within 2 weeks, Jessica was served. That evening, She arrived at the house looking shaken, holding a large brown envelope. "Tom," she said, "why did you file for divorce?" "I was planning to come home soon, maybe even this week." I invited her to sit and explained firmly, "It's too late for that now, Jessica. I told you I didn't want you to leave, but you chose to." She tried to explain herself, claiming she needed to find herself and feel confident. Cutting her off, I asked, "So, do you feel fulfilled now? Have you found what you were looking for?" As I spoke, my frustration built. "I've barely heard from you since you left. Not even a call on my birthday. Too busy with a trip to the Dominican, I imagine. Your mother even reached out wondering why you didn't call on Mother's Day. It seems your pursuit of new experiences has been your only focus." Jessica looked down, guilt evident in her expression. "Tom, I love you, and I realize I may have gone too far. I'm coming back." I stood my ground. "No, Jessica, you're not. You made your choices. You didn't even look through the paperwork you received, did you? Toward the end, there's a judge's ruling stating you need to stay 500 feet from this house until the divorce is finalized." Shock registered on her face as she began to understand the seriousness of our situation. I walked her to the door, emphasizing that we'd handle everything legally from here on out. A month later, without the need for a court appearance, our divorce was finalized. We sold the house and divided the assets evenly. Jessica received her share, but I heard through a friend that her personal life had become an open secret. The school advised her to keep a low profile after parents expressed concern about her social activities. Some parents even suspected that certain fathers had been involved, which heightened the discomfort. Soon after, Jessica was diagnosed with a non-serious but persistent health condition that required her to take a break from her dating life. Ironically, she also discovered she was pregnant, the likely father being one of her partners, a married man from her school. Her carefree lifestyle had left its mark, and now she was facing new challenges. As for me, I moved forward. I bought a new house, received a promotion at work, and Diane and I grew closer. Our relationship flourished, and we were thrilled to announce our engagement this summer. We're expecting a child around Christmas, a new beginning that has brought hope and happiness back into my life. What would you do if your partner asked for an open marriage, claiming it would help them understand themselves better? How do you deal with betrayal when your spouse openly seeks relationships outside your marriage? Do you think someone can truly maintain a relationship with their spouse while seeking validation from others? Is there ever a point of no return in a relationship, or can things be rebuilt even after deep betrayal? Can a marriage survive when both partners no longer agree on what it means to be committed? When does self-exploration cross the line into selfishness, and can it ever be justified? How should one handle a partner who's willing to share their body and emotions with others, yet still insists on maintaining the label of marriage? Would you forgive someone who made a decision that permanently altered the course of your life together?